if we look at the book, which is here, which again you get a PDF of, and or you can buy it on my website. It's the best place, or Amazon or Barnes & Noble. This has 5 chapters in it. In the first chapter, basically, we're going to look at it's a very different look at what Constellation's people call the family soul or the family system. Because basically I've grounded it in a different way. It's not some, there are parts of it that are psychic and mystical, non-local, atemporal, if you will. But a lot of it, I think, is, you don't have to get woo-woo at all to understand it. We have a social empathy system. It's working. We form groups. We have what's called distributed intelligences, and I will go through this in detail. So you'll get an understanding of what the family soul is in terms of your clients or anybody who's got a kind of mainstream scientific attitude. This makes sense, all right, and it works in talking to them. And it's hard social neurobiology. I mean, it's what I give you is a little bit oversimplified, but it's pure gold. This is what, when I did that workshop at Gary's Interfaith Church, this is what we did. And I think everybody got it. Okay. Chapter 2, we will anatomize one constellation. Chapter 1, there's 6 teaching examples that you'll get to sort of see how trauma passes from one generation down to the next, what it looks like. In the second one, we will take and do one situation and really anatomize it. In the process of anatomizing it, I will give you the names of 9 different techniques and several stages of a typical constellation. These are training wheels. You don't necessarily need to name them or whatever, but nobody, you know, in all of my training, nobody ever named these things. And that's easy enough to name them. I mean, it's not going to kill us to have some conceptual grounding for this. Because when you get there, you know, and you're sitting in some group, and you're trying to do a group constellation, and people tell you, preserve the phenomenological stance, that really doesn't help you very much. I'm going to tell you something different, which I think is much more graphic and makes much more sense. We now have a video, so instead of just using the diagrams in chapter 2, which are in the book, we've got the whole constellation modeled in terms of avatars in 3D space, so you'll see that. That's way beyond the diagrams. And I've also detailed other kinds of, you know, I've taken that same teaching example and detailed 2 or 3 other traumas that come from that same situation. This is way better than it was a year or 2 ago, but it was good a year or 2 ago. Chapter 3, it's called 7 Sources of, I don't know what it's called. It's called, The Sources of Hidden Loyalty, How and Why They Can Affect Your Own or Your Children's Lives. So we'll talk about the kind of 7 primary sources for cascading trauma, hidden loyalties, for traumas that, you know, what this means is grandpa and grandma had an experience which they never were able to process. It was powerful. Because they did not process it, it lives in the family system, just like personal trauma lives in your individual family system. And it shows up in a later generation in some analogous form. This chapter also asks the questions which almost never get asked. So it's common in family constellation circles to hear this statement: everyone who belongs to everyone who's a member of the family has an absolute right to belong. And that's very nice, except it's impossible to list who might belong to a family. There's no way to do it. I mean, I've tried, and I'm as reductionist as you can get, and you can't do it. You come back to this statement that anything that anybody who powerfully affects the fate of members of that family tends to become a family member, and therefore has these, rights to belong, if you want to call them that. I'm not sure these are the best words, but. And the other big question is, well, how serious does the trauma have to be in order to be big enough to cascade downstream through generations? And you come back to the same kind of thing. There's no hard and fast answer to that. You can't draw a line. If you are psychologically inclined, which a number of you are, you know that one person's experience is the same experience is traumatic for one person and not at all traumatic for another person. Trauma is overwhelmed to a nervous system. It cranks up the sympathetic nervous system, shuts down the parasympathetic, and it does things. It leaves these traces. So how big does it have to be to, cause something later on? And the answer is, it has to be sort of serious enough to affect the fate of the family in such a way that it's serious enough. And there's kind of no other way to do it. We learn this by looking back. And the only way we know that constellations make any sense is if they work. All right? And so many of them have worked so well that even though we don't have like laboratory quality evidence, though I'm starting to work with some people on that, it's too powerful to ignore. I mean, we use quantum theory and we still don't understand how that works really. That blows the normal minds of people's completely. So that's chapter 3. Chapter 4 is a whole big fun thing called home altar constellations. Home altar constellations are tabletop constellations. You can break out the parts of a human group, of a system, your inner family, your birth family, your ancestral family, some organization. You can do that in terms of people in a workshop. So the people, would you be my father, and someone's standing out there to represent dad, someone's over here representing the goal. Those people become the system. They feel into it. They're given certain instructions, which I will tell you about in detail. But you can also do this with what we call object persons. Call them object persons because I come from a shamanic perspective, and the world is alive and conscious, and these aren't just dumb rocks. They aren't just things. The English language is terrible in a way because there's no way to talk about, outside of us is it. It's not an it. It's not a him or a her or an it. We don't have words for this. But we can do, and let me show you very quickly here. We're going to slides. Yes, we are. We're going back to the screen share. So far, I'm managing. Here it is. Boom. If we go back to the screen share and we slide down one, here is a simple tabletop constellation. And this is a real one. This is a lady, a young woman who does not feel safe in the world at all and wants to feel safe. Her goal is safety. I asked her to intuitively, without thinking about it too much, pick something to represent mom, something to represent dad, something to represent herself, and something to represent safety. And this is what came out. First shot out of the bag. Now, do those symbols speak to you? I mean, do we have a big question in our mind why this person might not be feeling safe in the world? Mom is this big, large, feminine symbol, right? Safety is a little baby slipper. Our client, a female, is also a container, but she's been squared off, right? She's rectangular. So if you took a bowl and you sliced the sides, you'd get her. And right there in the middle is this great big kitchen knife, which is dad, with the sharp edge pointed towards her and standing right between mom and the client. And kind of threatening the direction from the client to safety. Now these are just symbols, and instead of saying to you, preserve the phenomenological stance, I'm going to say to you, Pick up these symbols like blossoms. Just look at them, pick them up, put them in a basket, and don't make too many bouquets right at first. You'll see this. So the home altar stuff is basically, I came out of shamanism. We used altars all the time. So early on, I was doing weekly work with some clients, and I said, well, why don't you set up a constellation, get a place in your house, set up a constellation, and go and visit it a couple times a day. So a home altar constellation is a tabletop constellation typically done with ordinary household objects, which are full of symbolism. And it happens in visits. It happens over time. There's tremendous advantages to it happening over time, because you go and you spend a little quality time with it, a little meditative time with it, and then you go away and you go about your business, or you go to sleep, and your subconscious goes to work on it. And believe me, that's very powerful. Guess what? If you've facilitated group constellations, guess what you don't have now? You have no time pressure. If you're doing it on your own, which the home altar class will take you through, everybody in the home altar class, which follows this class, does their own home altar constellations. Those who want send in pictures, and we all help. We all look at, a constellation every class and work with the person. But there's no time pressure. There's no client pressure, and you've got this whole rich array of symbolism. If you use little figurines here, you would not be seeing what you're seeing here. The figurines that I started out doing constellations with, or the footprints, or the pieces of paper that are commonly used, they don't have this kind of symbolism. And believe me, if once you sort of get your client into the fact that she or he is not supposed to be using her mind, we'll use our minds later. If our minds knew the answer, we wouldn't be doing this. So this is just much richer. I never went back after this. I still have the figurines. They sit on one of my chest of drawers, but I never use them, because this stuff speaks volumes right away. Okay, so that's chapter 4, and then chapter 4, the home altar chapter. Basically, we follow this class up starting September 28th with a 7-week home altar. It's really a practicum. Everybody who wants to sets up their own constellation, sends the pictures into Facebook, and we all help. We all look at them. We all help process them. It's really a very powerful experience for people. And frankly, if you've been trained in group constellations, I really recommend this, because it's going to take certain kinds of pressures off of you, and you're going to have a chance to develop. When I first started and I went straight into workshops, constellations, it was very scary, because you're sitting there and you've got all these people, they've paid you some money. You really don't know exactly what's going on with all these people out there, but you feel compelled to somehow do something. And those pressures really get in the way of developing your sense of the field. Because in a group constellation, you really have to sit quietly and wait for it to emerge and be in that state of, I have no idea what's going on here, and be comfortable with it. And what I'm doing while I'm sitting there is I'm just picking blossoms. I'm picking little symbolic blossoms. Well, over here, there's, this one looks this way. No, this one said that. I know the client did this. And I'm just picking blossoms, symbolic blossoms, putting them in a basket. I'm not making a lot of bouquets yet. What happens is the bouquets emerge from the basket. That's my version of the phenomenological stance. Then we go to chapter 5, which is basically about, what is healthy healthcare? What kind of facilitators should you look for or try to be in group constellations? And then we get seriously into trauma. Dan Siegel in Mindsight has this very, very lucid description of some of the neurology of trauma. You'll see I'm not going to go through this right now, but we'll go through a whole series of diagrams, little comic book diagrams like this, that give you I think, an amazingly useful vision of what's going on in your nervous system with trauma, and it's one that you can explain to clients really easily. I'm not going to do that right now, but you're welcome to ask me about it. And we're going now to, let's see, I think. So the bad news, trauma is everywhere on all these levels: organizational, ancestral, birth families, families of origin, and inner families. It's everywhere. It's bad news. The really good news is we got a single root source for all our troubles. More and more mainstream professional doctors are coming around to the perspective that chronic emotional or physical suffering is not a matter of some single organ messing up. It's a matter of various parts of the emotional, spiritual body-mind. We don't have a word for that, so the spiritual, emotional body-mind, that wholeness, there are parts of it that cannot talk to one another. They cannot cooperate with one another. There'll be plenty of examples later. So the good news is we've got a single root source. More good news, it behaves similarly on all levels. It does the same thing. It disconnects the underlying social group intelligence. And we form these distributed intelligences in our families. We form them at a cocktail party. We form them at a conference. Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology is really known for that all of us together there create a wonderfully warm, rich experience. It's unprecedented in my experience of professional conferences. It's very high quality stuff, but it's extremely welcoming and warm. That's what is called esprit de corps, right? That's that spirit, that group, underlying group is a brain. It's a distributed intelligence. It's not localized in any one of us. It behaves similarly on all levels, and the great news is similar low-tech, accessible, inexpensive tools like energy psychology and constellations work to fix it on all the levels. So there's bad news, but there's some very good news too. Okay, so we end this screen share, I think. Do we end this now? Yeah, we do. I'm going to stop right now. Let's just see what we need to do in the way of helping people catch up. I still have some more to say, but okay, where are we? What do you think? Talk to me.
Well, I just want to apologize for my internet went down for 10 minutes, so I missed a bit in the middle. But
you're forgiven. No questions?
We need to raise our...
raise your hand if somebody's talking, and otherwise, if nobody's talking, just talk. Go ahead, Kiram.
I was just going to say thank you. It looks comprehensive and very applicable and educative. My question is, to what extent does the course actually support us as practitioners, not just as understanding, appreciation, etc.? The application. I hear the altar stuff, Will.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering otherwise.
I anatomize the constellation for you in chapter 2 in terms of the various stages, what you need to be trying to do during those various stages, what techniques you can apply when and why and how. This is very, very down to earth and practical. And then the thing is, we take those exact same guidelines and we flip over to the private constellation, the tabletop, the home altar, and we alter those guidelines a little bit. And it's the same stuff. Same exact stuff. Same kind of stages, same 8 or 9 techniques now that we're applying them a little differently, but same stuff. I started out as a cognitive scientist. And the game that we played was how do we create algorithms? How do we create, how does the brain understand a metaphor? we weren't talking about neurology. We were building more like computer models, and the computer models were pretty damn crude. So, the game that I've played all through my life is to figure out kind of what the underlying pattern is and what people are doing, and then make it explicit. So the 9 techniques in chapter 2 and in chapter 4, basically they're all the things I saw my teachers doing, but my teachers never named them. They never gave me a list of them. It's not their thing. That's my thing. Do you know what I mean? That's the way I work. So I believe you'll find that this is very powerful practical training. And again, I'm of the opinion, I haven't sold it to the rest of the Constellation community yet, but I'm of the opinion that really, in addition to the group trainings that people take, they really ought to do the home altar work. It really frees you from handling a group at the beginning is just too much. Not only are you not told the techniques, all right, you're just so much of the experiential training is just like you watch a constellation, somebody does it, then you have like this little discussion afterwards about this and that and the other thing. Nobody's pointing out I did this because, or they, so on and so forth. So I think you'll find it's very practical, super practical.
Thanks.
And if you want to make a bet, we can make a bet. Let's see, where are you? What country are you in?
Australia.
Well, so we'd have to do a currency. So I can't bet you $10 easily, but I think you'll find it's very practical.
Thank you.
Who else? Talk to me.
Izzy has a question.
Oh, well, actually, it was more a reflection for
We'll reflect.
In addition to what Michael just responded to, Karim. I mean, for me, it's kind of what I said at the beginning. Having been exposed to constellations for 11 years, and done the normal kind of training, I intuitively knew how to do constellations, but I didn't actually realize what I was doing until I did Michael's course. And so now when it just allowed me to drop so much more easily, to really be so okay with sitting with the unknown, because I knew that if there was nothing arising, I could just go to my little internal list, indoctrinated, with Michael's classes and the books, so easy to follow, and just go, okay, well, if nothing's arising, let's try this.
Yep.
Let's just see, how about if we do this, how does it fit? And it just allowed me to know that although I like to think that my intuition of picking up the field is what's, primarily there in place, I had backup inside my cognitive, but if nothing was arising, then this, you could try this, you could try this, there was just all this stuff that before I mean, it was amazing doing the course that I realized how much I knew that I usually didn't realize that I was doing. But it just really did, for me, give me a very, very practical framework. And the metaphors just help. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. One of the metaphors that I've started using recently is this one. These guidelines that I give you, they're like the landing gear on an airplane. They allow your intuition to take off and fly. If you have an airplane with no landing gear, it's up there, but it can't get down to earth and explain to people what the hell it's doing, and it can't, I won't pull the metaphor too far, but they're the training wheels. I expect this will train your intuition. I'm telling you, it will train your intuition. And I don't think about these techniques at all anymore, but I'm still doing them. I'm rolling through them very quickly in different ways.
I have to say, having listened to you and Izzy, I also do get the feeling that it's really providing a framework, background that can integrate, so that the phenomenological method can just happen much more easily.
Yeah. But again, people in the United States anyway, they don't know what the hell the phenomenological method means in a way. And the explanations of it don't make cognitive sense. The explanations are, I'm only seeing what is. Nobody sees what is. Everybody.
That's because we're all in our head. Most of us are in our heads or our hearts. We're not in our full bodies.
Well, that's true. But even if you get past that, you're still subjective. There's no way around that. There isn't any objective stuff out there. All right. The best we can do is work towards an overlap of our inevitable subjectivity, right? And build out of that some kind of communal understanding. But it's not given. There's no, anyway, that gets sort of philosophical. Who else?
Christina has her hand up.
Go ahead.
So I've been doing a little happy dance over here because of the resonance of what you're speaking about with the inner parts. Because that, before I was exposed to constellations, or actually constellations, me doing it in other groups is what allowed all of my parts to really emerge safely. And it didn't, but I wasn't given that context there. It was always about someone in your family line, you know, like a real specific person. But so all of my work the past 4 or 5 years has all been about my inner characters, is what I call them. And I use altars a lot with my clients, and what I'm creating is a program to help people really get their inner peeps in line so that they can move together as a unit. And I have a performance art piece that's all done around this. And what I'm feeling is like, wow, this feels really like it could be a very concrete way to help others really get a handle on those different beings that are competing and you know, distracting and not allowing that flow to happen. So would you agree with me that this?
Oh yeah, I'll do a happy dance too now.
Yeah.
You know, there's a book called Internal Family Systems Therapy by Richard Schwartz. I think it's Richard or Robert. You know, your inner parts, your inner personality parts, they are all reactions for or against the people in your birth family, in your developmental family. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, you know, you when you start work on this inner family level, a lot of times, you know, the part that's like one of my parts is the one that both loved dad and was beaten up by dad. Do you understand me? Yes. It's formed around my father. Yes. So I mean, I had to do certain ancestral work with my father, or I wouldn't be alive right now. Constellation saved my life. Read the prologue to the book. It's and it's the truth.
Excellent.
But you know, it just, they're all connected.
They are. And I mapped after speaking with one of my teachers. I did go back and map all of my characters, and many of them are a grandfather, or you know, they definitely carry that energy of what was not allowed in them, and it's right here, right now, and it's really so helpful. Yeah. So helpful to integrate them. So I work with a lot of young people, and it kind of rites of passage initiatory processes. That's been primarily shamanic, but this feels like it would be a really sweet way to ground it with some science. I love that your models and visuals that really help support it and ground it.
Thank you very much. Happy dance here too. Who else?
Anybody Michael, are you able to see the chat box? Maria has a question for you in the chat box. She's not able to do audio.
Hold on.
It's at the very bottom.
Hold on.
Oops.
Okay, the question is, have I been able to successfully practice across culture, race, socioeconomic backgrounds? Certainly people from different countries, certainly different genders, certainly different ages. I don't get access to Native Americans. I don't get access to Black Americans. I don't know of any reason why this would not work. It's a very concrete, action-oriented method, but I can't go further than that in terms of what I've actually experienced. What else is here? I'm looking at this right now. Yeah, okay, the question here is family similar to whole-on from integral theory. Everything is a whole-on. Everything is a whole composed of parts. Which parts are wholes composed of parts? I mean, there's kind of no stopping it. On every level, it's the same thing.
It's fractal.
How long will we have access to the videos once we've taken the course? At least a year, but the thing is, just download them if you want them. Basically, no, wait a minute. We're putting them on YouTube now. Right, Sandy?
Yes, I was just typing that as you were answering that.
Yeah, they're on YouTube, so there's no
Yes.
reason why they would go away unless YouTube went away.
They're privately accessed on YouTube, just to make
Yeah,
that.
they're private. That is to say, and we ask that you don't spread them around. But they're not. We don't. No, I'm sorry. They're unlisted. They're not private. Private means you have to invite the people. Unlisted means it's not going to show up in a search, but if you have the URL, you can find it. Okay, so we went up to chapter, I'm going to go on for another minute. When we get through chapter 5 basically is trauma. The kinds, how it works, bonding, resonance. And again, I'm coming from a very systems theoretic, ethno-biological perspective here. It's not woo-woo. I have 5 bullet points that define the family soul. Only one of them has anything to do with anything psychic. The rest of them... Okay, so we went up to chapter... I'm going to go on for another minute. When we get through chapter 5 basically is trauma. The kinds, how it works, bonding, resonance. And again, I'm coming from a very systems theoretic, ethno-biological perspective here. It's not woo-woo. I have 5 bullet points that define the family soul. Only one of them has anything to do with anything psychic. The rest of them I would defend as empirical as you could want.